The room went completely silent. There he was, my old boss, Mr. Harrison, standing in front of my office desk, his face pale as a ghost, his lips slightly open like he had just seen something impossible. And to him, it probably was. Because I was sitting behind the desk now. I was the new vice president of the company. And he was the one being demoted and transferred under me. I looked him dead in the eye, trying not to let my hands shake from the rush of emotions flooding through me. Fear, pride, anger, and a tiny bit of joy. He had tried to ruin my life 2 years ago. He almost succeeded. But now I held his future in my hands. And I had a choice to make. Have a seat, Harrison, I said calmly. We have a lot to talk about. His jaw clenched, but he sat down slowly, still trying to process what was happening. I smiled, not out of pettiness, but because I had climbed a mountain no one believed I could. But how did I get here? How does a guy with 0 connections, no fancy degree, and barely enough money to pay rent become the boss of the man who tried to destroy him? It all started 2 years ago, with a $14 microwave. Back then, I was working in the IT department, just a regular help desk technician. Nothing glamorous. I fixed computers, reset passwords, and occasionally set up Zoom meetings for people who should have known how to do it themselves. My name is Alex, by the way. I kept my head down, did my work well, and always treated people with kindness. I believed in that. My mom always told me, be kind, even when it's hard. That's how you grow strong. But not everyone believed in kindness, especially not Mr. Harrison. Harrison was the head of operations, loud, arrogant, and always walking around like he owned the place. He wore expensive suits, clicked his pen nonstop, and had this habit of looking down on anyone he thought was beneath him. Which, according to him, was basically everyone. One morning, I was heating up my homemade breakfast burrito in the break room. Harrison stormed in, flung open the fridge, then slammed it shut. "Where the hell is my lunch?" he barked. No one said anything. The break room was tiny, and people often brought in lunch bags that looked the same. It happened. But Harrison was having none of it. He turned to me, narrowed his eyes, and said, "Did you take it, Alex?" I blinked. "Sir, no. I brought my own." He walked over to the microwave, opened it, and saw my food. "Is that my burrito?" I laughed nervously. "No, sir. It's mine. I made it at home. You can check the foil. It has my name on it." He didn't even bother. He just grabbed my food, tossed it into the trash, and walked out. No one said a word. I was too stunned to move. My hands were clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. But I stayed calm. I made another one later at home. That's just who I was. But that was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, Harrison accused me of slacking off. He said I was surfing the web during work hours, even though I was responding to support tickets nonstop. He reported me to HR. HR started watching me closely after that. My manager, who used to praise my work, began pulling me into awkward check-ins every week. I felt the atmosphere shift. Like everyone was doubting me. Then came the final straw, the missing inventory report. It was a routine update I had submitted like always. But this time, someone had changed it after I turned it in. Parts of it were deleted, and it looked like I had failed to report several broken laptops. Harrison claimed it was a sign of negligence. HR believed him. I was suspended for a week. I sat in my tiny apartment that week, staring at my ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, numb. I thought about quitting, walking away, starting over somewhere else. But I remembered what my mom told me, and I decided something right then and there. If Harrison wanted to ruin my life, I'd build one so strong he couldn't touch it. When I returned to work, I acted like nothing had happened. I smiled, did my job, and stayed quiet. But behind the scenes, I started learning. I signed up for every free business course I could find online: marketing, finance, leadership. I stayed up till 2 a.m. some nights reading about how companies worked, how executives thought, and how promotions really happened. I started volunteering for projects outside my department. I helped marketing with data. I gave feedback to HR about help desk trends. I even assisted in budget meetings when someone from finance called in sick. People started noticing. They saw how I handled stress, how I supported others, how I brought calm to chaos. And little by little, people began to trust me. Even the CEO. One day, a big project was falling apart, a software rollout gone wrong. I jumped in, fixed bugs, rewrote some of the back-end scripts, and stayed up all night helping the entire team recover it. The next morning, I got an email from the CEO herself. "Let's talk," she wrote. That was the start of everything. Over the next year, I got promoted twice. First to team lead, then to department head. I took night classes, got certified, and never stopped grinding. And now I was vice president. And Harrison, he was in the hot seat. "We have a lot to talk about," I repeated, leaning forward. But before I could say another word, the door burst open, and someone walked in holding a folder that would change everything. The person who walked in was Sarah from HR. Her eyes were wide, and she was clutching the folder like it contained a live snake. Harrison turned his head toward her, and I saw it, the flicker of panic in his eyes. He knew that folder had something in it he didn't want me to see. Sarah looked from me to Harrison, then back to me. "Alex, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. Right now." She handed me the folder without another word. The label read, "Confidential, Harrison, Internal Investigation." I opened it slowly, every page like a punch to the gut. There were emails, printed screenshots, even a signed statement. Harrison had been more than just cruel to me. He had set up false reports, deleted files, and manipulated others to cover it up. And not just with me. There were other employees listed, each with their own horror story. Harrison stood up suddenly. "This isn't necessary. We can talk privately, Alex." I stood up too, the folder still in my hands. "No, I think this conversation just changed. Subscribe if you want to hear the rest, because this is just getting started. But let's go back again, to where things started to shift. About 6 months after I was suspended, things in the company started to change. The CEO had begun pushing for a new initiative, Promote from Within. She wanted leaders who knew the company inside and out, not just people with shiny resumes. I took advantage of that. I started mentoring new hires. I wrote training documents, built new tools to help departments communicate better, and made sure no one felt left behind, especially the interns. I remembered how awful it felt to be looked down on, and I didn't want anyone else to go through that. One day, a new intern named Josh joined the IT team. He was quiet, a little awkward, and always stayed late even when he didn't need to. I saw myself in him, so I helped him. Josh and I worked on a side project, a dashboard to track support ticket efficiency. It wasn't fancy, but it saved managers hours of reporting time. The CEO saw it in a meeting and asked who made it. When my name came up, she personally asked me to present it in a company-wide meeting. After that, doors started opening. Not all at once, but slowly. One day, I got an email from a director in finance. She needed someone to audit their internal IT systems. I agreed. It was while doing that audit that I stumbled on something weird, a bunch of files with broken links, strange folder names, and logs that didn't match up. I flagged it, curious. She looked into it and found a string of irregularities tied to Harrison's department. Nothing huge, but suspicious. She quietly reported it to HR. That's when the slow unraveling began. HR didn't act right away, but they watched. They started interviewing employees. Quietly, carefully. Meanwhile, I kept moving up. Until the day the CEO pulled me aside and asked me if I would take on a special project, overseeing a department reorganization. "You've earned this," she said, "and we need someone we can trust." And that's how I became Harrison's boss. But now, with this folder in my hands, I realized this was more than personal. This was about everyone Harrison had hurt. About justice. About doing the right thing. I looked up from the folder, straight into Harrison's eyes. Greg didn't stop. After the failed attempt with the fake report, he went after my team. He'd whisper doubts into their ears, assign impossible deadlines, and then blame me when things weren't perfect. Slowly, he poisoned the trust one had built. One day, I overheard him in the break room with our intern, Tyler. Jack's been slipping. Huh? I mean, you're smart. You can probably run this department better. Tyler looked uncomfortable but nodded anyway. I didn't confront Greg then. I was playing the long game. I started documenting everything. Every strange email, every comment, every sabotage. Meanwhile, I started connecting with people in other departments. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Greg had tried to crush. People in HR, sales, and even IT had similar stories. We started sharing information quietly. At home, things weren't easy either. My girlfriend, Sarah, could see how stressed I was. "You need to get out of there," she said one night. "It's not worth it." "It is," I replied. "Not just for me. For everyone has stepped on." I stayed late one Friday night to finish a big presentation for a client. Greg had been hinting that if it went well, I'd finally get the promotion I'd earned. I double-checked everything, sent it to him for review, and went home feeling hopeful. Monday morning, the client meeting began. I walked into the boardroom and saw Greg presenting my presentation with his name on it. He'd removed all mention of my work. He stood there confidently, feeding them my lines. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. The client clapped, the team nodded, and Greg smiled directly at me as if daring me to speak. After the meeting, I pulled him aside. "That was my work." "Don't be dramatic," he said, patting my shoulder. "We're a team." That was the last straw. I reported him to HR with my documentation. But what I didn't know was that Greg had already planted something in my file, a mysterious complaint with no name attached, accusing me of being hostile and uncooperative. When HR saw both complaints, they decided to investigate both sides. Until then, I was suspended. I walked out of that office feeling like I had lost everything. But that's when everything changed. Because while I was suspended, Greg made a mistake so big, it would come back to destroy him. Subscribe if you want to know what happened next. Because this story, it's just getting started. 3 words: fraud, exposure, karma, and then I said something I never thought I'd say. I think you should call your lawyer. The next morning, I walked into the office and found the atmosphere heavy. No one looked me in the eye. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared blankly at the screen. Was this it? Was I going to be forced out of the company without a word? I didn't have long to think because the HR director, Melissa, asked me to come into the conference room. "Hi, Jack," she said softly. "We received a serious complaint yesterday. It's under investigation. You're on administrative leave for now." I sat there, numb. I didn't do anything wrong. "My boss is setting me up." "I know this is difficult," she replied. "You'll still receive pay. We just need time to sort everything out." I walked out of that building feeling like the world had ended. My hands trembled as I drove home. All my work, my passion, my dreams, gone in a second because someone didn't like that I worked hard. At home, I stayed on my couch for days. I barely ate. The only reason I got up was my little sister, Emily. She knocked on my door with a grilled cheese sandwich. "You're not giving up, are you?" she said. "You told me never to let a bully win." That broke something inside me, in a good way. She was right. I got up the next morning and started building my backup plan. A year ago, I had registered a small LLC, just in case. Now, it was time to go all in. I called some old college friends who had their own companies. One of them, Mike, ran a small marketing agency. "Jack, man, I heard what happened. Listen, I need someone to handle my finance division. Come on board and you can use my office to build your own brand, too." That offer felt like oxygen after being underwater. I took it. I started small. Bookkeeping for local clients. A free workshop on budgeting at the local library. Slowly, people started trusting me. I offered fair prices, clear results, and honest work. Meanwhile, my old company was struggling. Rumors were spreading. My boss, Greg, was getting more aggressive with other employees. Some even contacted me. "Jack, you were right about him. I think he's driving the company into the ground." Months passed. My business grew. Mike and I became partners. We took on bigger clients. Eventually, We merged with another mid-sized firm. Guess who had to submit a proposal for consulting help? Yep, Greg's company. He walked into the meeting room expecting someone else. When he saw me at the head of the table, his face turned pale. "Jack," he stammered. I didn't know you'd be here." I smiled politely. "Please, have a seat. Let's discuss how we can save your company." He looked down, embarrassed. The rest of the team listened as I laid out a solid plan without rubbing it in. After the meeting, he stayed behind. "You really built all this?" "Yep," I said. "From nothing. Funny what a little motivation can do." Greg paused. "I was wrong about you." I nodded. "Yeah, you were." That moment felt like true victory, not because I had power over him, but because I didn't let his hate define me. But things weren't over yet. A week later, I received an anonymous envelope in my office. No return address. Inside was a photo of Greg talking to someone in a dark parking lot, someone I recognized from his past shady deals. On the back, a message. "You don't know half of it." Who sent it? Why now? And what exactly had Greg been hiding all this time? Subscribe if you want to know what happens next. The truth. It's darker than I ever imagined. 3 words. Secrets. Betrayal. Revenge. I couldn't stop staring at that photo. Greg, clearly visible, handing over what looked like a thick folder to a man in a black hoodie. I knew that man. Years ago, he was investigated for embezzlement but managed to avoid charges. What was Greg doing with him? I brought it up with Mike. This could mean trouble, maybe even criminal stuff. "Are you going to report it?" "Not yet. I want to find out more." I reached out to Lisa, a friend who worked as a private investigator. We hadn't spoken in years, but after I explained everything, she agreed to help. Within a few days, she sent over surveillance photos. Greg had been meeting with the same man multiple times, always in different locations. Lisa believed they were laundering money or burying illegal payments. Meanwhile, our firm had taken over part of Greg's company's operations through consulting. I now had access to internal files. Late one night, I was digging through emails and came across something shocking, a backdated invoice tied to a shell company. It was obvious. Greg had been funneling money to fake contractors. I printed everything and brought it to Mike. "This is fraud. He's stealing from his own company." "We have to go to the board," Mike said. But just as we started preparing, something else happened. Greg showed up at our office. "Jack," he said coldly, "we need to talk." He had found out we were investigating. He threatened to sue, claimed we were spying on him illegally. "You think you're the good guy? You're nothing. I made you." That's when I finally lost my calm. "You didn't make me. You tried to break me. And all you did was push me to be better." Greg stormed out. But I knew something had changed. He was scared. The next day, we got word Greg had been suspended by the company board. They were launching a full internal audit. I should have felt relief. But instead, I felt uneasy. Because that same evening, my apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but my files, my backup drive with all the evidence, was gone. Subscribe for what comes next. You won't believe who was behind it. 3 words. Theft. Truth. Fire. After the break-in, I moved into Mike's guest house temporarily. I didn't feel safe. It wasn't just about Greg anymore. It was about someone else working with him. Lisa dug deeper. Turns out the man Greg met in those parking lots was tied to a company contractor who handled security systems. That's how they knew when I wouldn't be home. But that wasn't the worst part. 2 days later, Lisa called me, her voice shaky. "Jack, someone tried to follow me home last night. Be careful. You're getting close." We took all our findings to the authorities. The IRS got involved. So did the FBI. Turns out, Greg had been part of a money laundering ring using corporate accounts for years. As the investigation grew, more people were implicated: an accountant, a legal advisor, and a contractor who built fake shell companies, all working quietly behind the scenes. Greg was arrested. His face was on the news. I watched it from Mike's living room, half relieved, half numb. "You did it," Mike said. "He can't hurt you anymore." But I didn't feel victorious. I thought about all the people Greg had hurt, all the careers he had ruined. I thought about how long I had kept quiet, afraid, playing it safe. So I made a choice. We restructured our firm. We created a whistleblower division, free support, legal advice, and resources for people afraid to speak up at work. I gave talks at colleges. I visited shelters. I hired people who had been blacklisted by bad bosses. Because success isn't about getting revenge. It's about rising above and lifting others while you do it. Months later, I got a letter from Greg. You won. I lost everything. But maybe I needed to. I never responded. Some chapters don't need closure. They just need to end. Subscribe if you've ever been doubted or knocked down, because your story isn't over. It's just beginning. 3 words: justice, growth, power.